All right. I'm Stacia Rain Stonerook. Thank you for being here. Thank you to Artifactory for having me. This is a really lovely opportunity to share my work. Just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Cedar Rapids. I was an art and theater kid. I was constantly making things and tormenting my grandmother with half-finished projects around the house. Boiling newspaper and melting plastic bags, and actually here it is. This is none of those, but I dug up some old high school work just for fun. As Bob said, these figures here are actually from a figure drawing group at College, and that is how I'm connected to Artifactory today. So I was an art kid. I was making things constantly. I was a docent at the Museum of Art, and I came to the University of Iowa naturally to study psychology. I don't know where that pivot happened. I did not have a plan. I learned pretty quickly that I had no interest in working in the field. But I was afraid to study art, and I feel like this is a pretty common fear with any kind of artistic hobby, is that if you study it, it's going to remove the joy from it. So I got the degree in psychology, which thank goodness, because I think I needed it to live with my own brain. But I still wanted to do art. I wanted to participate in the arts in some way. And at the time I had this notion of what that meant. And I focused really heavily on technical skills, which was great. I'm glad I have that base. But I ended up doing to myself what I thought going to school for art would do to me, is that I removed the joy from it. I was focusing so much on realistic teapots and fantastic butts that I didn't really allow myself a lot of time to work on what made me happy. I feel like I have a big pot of imagination brain soup to pull from, and I was not using any of it. So in 2017, I applied and I painted my own bench as part of the Benchmarks program. This was a lot of fun, and it was kind of a turning point for me in that it reminded me that there's space for me in the arts community. There are ways for me to participate that aren't just being an MFA student and having my work in galleries constantly. And it reminded me what it's like to work on something that may not be technically perfect, but that's fun, and that comes from my own imagination. And so that's what I started letting myself do, is just things that make me happy. And even if that's sometimes just lots of squiggles, this is not even a fraction of the squiggles. Today I want to talk about a few of the ingredients in that brain soup. I feel like I've spent so long focusing on technical skills that I'm just kind of getting a foothold in what I actually want to be creating. I'll touch on a few of those specific pieces that I'm excited about and concepts I want to keep exploring, and then I'll wrap up with some design work that I've been excited about lately. So the first concept I want to talk about, this is not the best word for this. If you've spent enough time on the internet, you may be familiar with the concept of trypophobia. I don't think the word phobia is really that accurate, because there are entire internet communities dedicated to sharing images like this. And I feel like it's pretty rare for somebody to have a phobia and look at images and say, this is really terrible, please show me more. I actually pulled a few quotes from one of those internet communities. One of the only things that can make my stomach hurt just looking at it, I am both horrified and intrigued. Oh wow, good job, I really hate this. So I feel like both horrified and intrigued is a good way to describe the kind of fascination and revulsion that people feel. And if you've not heard of this, you might be learning something about yourself if you just really hate looking at these things. But I love it. I find it very compelling. These are textures I want to keep exploring, so I've incorporated them into my work heavily. And this is, reminiscent of fungus and weird plants and cell structures, and it's not just that kind of trypophobia concept. This is just an obsession with weird biological organic textures and forms that I like to explore. Biology in general. Actually, if we step over here into the human body, this is another ingredient in the soup, not human bodies, more in a figurative sense. I love a good Golgi body or an endoplasmic reticulum. I think this started when I was in school. I would take notes by drawing all of the diagrams. Quickly learned it's a lot more fun to draw the inside of a cell than it is to try and illustrate Watergate. And this kind of stuck with me. I briefly considered medical illustration, but I found it a lot more fun to manipulate and abstract these things from their original forms as much as I could. So those, you might have noticed, I have two settings. It's none of the color and beating you over the head with it. So for that latter half, these are not my own images, but these are major sources of inspiration for me that I really wanted to share. These three images on the left here, vintage sci-fi art and comic art in general, but specifically Moebius or Jean Giraud. He was a French comic artist. His work was, I think, mostly in the 1960s, and it's surreal and fantastic and colorful, and I love that it tells a story, literally, in terms of comic art. In the middle here, we have a heaping helping of specifically the Codex Seraphinianus. Highly recommend you explore this if you've never heard of it. There are PDFs available online. This is an illustrated encyclopedia of an imaginary world. It was created by Italian artist Luigi Serafini in 1981, and it is an extraordinary piece of art. This is something that I found in high school, and I was immediately obsessed. It's full of bizarre alien plants and depictions of cultures, and what I love most about it is that it tells a story. It has an entire world built behind it. The world building of it is a major part of the appeal for me. And then over on the right here, Fauvism was also an early love. As a docent at the Art Museum, we had an Impressionism exhibit, and I was particularly drawn to the most ridiculous use of color. Fauvism was actually a term that was coined around the turn of the 20th century because their contemporaries thought that their use of color was beastly. And les fauves actually translates from French to the wild beasts. A quote from the time was, "A pot of paint has been flung into the face of the public." I love that they found this use of color to be so objectionable, but I love assaulting eyeballs with color. Combine those things and you get pieces like this. These are a few pieces I created in 2020, and they also have kind of a world built behind them. There are other smaller works that are kind of part of this world. There's even a bit of writing that is not ready for public eyes, but this is something I'm really excited about, and I love the idea of having my own cinematic universe. What would you call that in terms of two-dimensional art? I'm not sure, but it's a world I want to keep exploring. So those are a few of the traditional art pieces and sources of inspiration. This piece is one of my favorites. It's had a few different names. I usually just call it Rules because the idea is exploring the concept of relaxing and removing and altering rules as you kind of go down the rows here, depicting a descent into chaos. If you look at it long enough, you might be able to tease out what some of those rules are. And I love a piece that gives more the longer you look at it. This is a concept. I have an 8-foot tall installation piece planned, should I ever have the time and resources to create it. I see those eyebrows go up. Yeah, I'm excited about it. So we'll see where that goes. This is mostly just here to share the tip that if you turn piles of clothes into an art project, it's a really good excuse to put off doing laundry. I'm sorry, this is part of an active piece of art. I just can't. These were a lot of fun, very therapeutic to work with shading that's a little more pointless. And then these are also part of a series. Some of the other pieces have been lost to time, which is a really bad excuse at my age. But this is the Hamburgen and John's Grocery. Somebody out there, thanks to Redbubble, has this illustration of John's Grocery on a phone case, and I just really love that dedication to an Iowa City staple. I would love to keep working on these. I think there are a few more locations that deserve to be in this collection. My cat is very cute, and you needed to see her. She has seen this drawing of herself. She approves, and I thought she deserved her 15 seconds of fame. She is very cute, and she knows it, as you can see. And then my cabbages. I love this piece. Our kitchen is very naked without it. I created this as I was learning some fun facts about red cabbage. The Brassica family is super cool. I love that one plant kind of gave birth to these 6 different vegetables. That it's more than 6. This graphic is just entirely too limited. But these are some of my favorite vegetables, and knowing they all came from the same plant is really cool. And then anthocyanin, that gives red cabbage its color, is an excellent pH indicator. I found this out the hard way when I decided to have red cabbage and eggs one morning. A chicken egg's pH is between 9 and 10, so I got green eggs. Great way to have green eggs and ham naturally, if that's what you're into. I was a little bit surprised. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you add an acid and you get hot pink. Or a hot pink cocktail. Do not make this with red cabbage, please. Try it with blueberries. It also works. I just wanted an excuse to share a cocktail recipe I really love. This is something I came up with when I had to become my own bartender during the pandemic. If I wanted a fancy cocktail at all in 2020, I needed to make it myself. So if you are entirely too lazy to make simple syrup, talk to me afterwards. I have a shortcut that I don't feel like I can share, like it's entirely too lazy to promote as an actual option. So now I want to talk about a few pieces of design I've worked on over the last few years. The first of which is Brink. This is the literary journal Bob was talking about. Corey and Kathleen each have pieces in issue 1 and issue 2. There's so many local Iowa City artists and writers and poets that have had their work. We're on issue 3 now, but I wanted to share some of the design process. We went through quite a few iterations, and it was a lot of fun. I was encouraged by Nina Lohman, who is the publisher. She's an absolute powerhouse of the Iowa City community, if you're not familiar with her. An amazing writer, and she came up with this concept of being on the brink of something. And after all of this kind of trial and error, we landed on issue 1, on the brink of trouble. And now we are on issue 3, which is coming out April 1st, but I do have a handful of advanced copies if you want to get your hands on one a little bit early. I have a sneak peek of the inside here, but this has been such a fun project to work on. Doing the layout design is something I realized I really love. We have Riverside Theatre here. On the leftmost side, those are all kind of works that were presented virtually during the pandemic. But in the last year or two in general, Riverside's kind of been in a period of transition. They have a rich 40-plus year history. They've been through a lot of changes. They've had quite a few different identities, but if you're not aware, they've just moved into a new space on the Ped Mall. It is absolutely gorgeous. And this period of transition I felt like was a really good time to kind of iron out a more consistent visual identity. And so that's what I've been trying to do. The Eden Prairie 1971 and the Niceties are both shows that have been presented in the new space. You may not be able to tell the resolution, but the Niceties is still running. This is an excellent show. If you haven't seen it, please make it a priority. See the new space, check out this amazing work. This is not a very well-veiled advertisement. But this design in general, this process of trying to establish a more consistent look has given me a good opportunity to exercise the ability to balance branding with these ever-changing shows. And my design philosophy in general, which is nothing revolutionary, is that it doesn't matter how readable it is if nobody's looking at it, and it doesn't matter how good it looks if nobody can understand it. And so I feel like we've kind of reached a really good balance here, and I'm excited about the rest of this season and where this look goes. And then FilmScene. So I don't know if I mentioned, I'm the graphic designer and marketing manager at FilmScene. I have been for 3.5 years. So this has been my home, and I've had so many opportunities to work on everything from children's coloring pages for the picture show series to icons that we needed to communicate policies during COVID. I've worked on my animation skills, some illustration, and through all of this, FilmScene has also been through a period of transition. In 2019, we moved into the Chauncey building. Of course, the pandemic hit immediately afterwards, so we haven't really had an opportunity to enjoy the space, and we're still kind of developing what our identity looks like in this new space. But it's given me an opportunity to evolve our branding as we evolve, and I've incorporated, I've tried to incorporate branding elements that ground it in a physical space. We have wood, like kind of chevron, herringbone wood paneling outside of our theater pods. You can't really see it here, but that's a texture I incorporate pretty consistently. And just trying to juggle that with all of our sub-series branding is a really fun challenge. And that's it for me. This is some miscellaneous doodads I wanted to include and couldn't fit anywhere else. Thank you all so much for being here. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but I'm happy to answer them if you do.
Could you go back to the screen where you have the little boxes in black and white and talk about that some more?
Sure.
Are the rules here with us today?
They are, actually, and I do have prints available. It's on the wall right over there, and it is right here, kind of in smaller form. So did you have any specific questions?
Yeah, tell us more about it. I mean,
Just a couple little things about that piece. I don't think I've ever shared what the rules actually are. I will share a few. There were a few kind of early versions of, but for example, right in the beginning here, there is one black circle. It is always the same size. There is one black dot. There is one, a number of thick black lines with one thin black line. They can only be oriented vertically or horizontally. For example, I think there are a few more rules than that, but I have a list actually written out somewhere. These are hard-coded rules. And then you go down a level, and now the lines still need to be straight, but they can be at any angle. The circles still need to be black and filled in, but they can have an outline and they can change size. So you can see as it goes down, now the lines can curve, the circles can be hollow, and every rule kind of bends and is altered in that way. And then down at the bottom here, there was a rule that the black lines couldn't have any interruption, but now they have some texture inside of them. Those little black triangles at the top have turned into chaotic textures on one side of the frame. So that might give you, I don't want to tell you what every rule is, but that kind of gives you an idea of how they're being changed as you descend.
So so you did a set, say the set at the top, and then when you went to start the next set, then did you establish your new rules or your rules you were going to break before you started, or in the process?
I think I established them before because this was mostly freehand. I didn't plan a ton of it out in advance. So yeah, before each row, I kind of established how each rule was going to change to make sure they were consistent across the row.
How long did you work on this? What time span was this?
This particular piece, I think, took the span of an evening, but that was after quite a few earlier versions where I had kind of toyed with what those rules should look like and how I wanted to alter them. And there were some pitfalls. If you get halfway down and you've broken all of the rules, you have nowhere else to go. So I kind of learned what that pacing should look like, I guess. So I tend to work, I get very hyper-focused. So in the span of one evening, that's me sitting down for 6 hours straight and not stopping. I'm not very good at spending half an hour a day and picking it up every day. My attention span will be gone by day 2, and it will be on something else in an entirely different medium. I might be working on a stop motion animation by then. So if the whim hits, I need to just run with it at the time. So.
Is this an exercise that you made up, or is
Yeah.
it something structured?
It's a concept I wanted to see represented visually. It's something I thought of, and I was curious how it would look. And every time I toyed with it, I enjoyed the process of. I think it's kind of funny that I was so afraid that studying art would remove the joy from it, and here I am like implementing strict rules.
It's very advanced.
For how thanks. You would say that. Thank you. But yeah, I love this combination of such a therapeutic, kind of freeing activity paired with strict rules and processes for how I'm implementing it. Yes.
Would you say that you've, given what you're afraid of with school kind of taking the joy away, would you say you found a balance there since now you work doing graphic design?
Absolutely. I think I had such a rigid, limited notion of what it looked like to be an artist that I hadn't considered that getting to do layout design and designing posters for the local theater. I didn't even consider those as options or something that was available to me. I had in my head that you are an MFA painter with your working galleries or bust. And now I get to have, I make my living working in graphic design, and then in my free time, I have a lot more freedom with my traditional art because it's not something I'm selling or on a deadline for. It's not a homework assignment. So I'm extraordinarily lucky to have found that balance. Carrie.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Brink?
Brink, yeah, absolutely.
I'm new to it.
Yeah, this is a literary journal that Brink was we started working on it in 2020. This is a group of originally four or five women. We have Nina Loman, our publisher, and then we have our handful of poetry, fiction, nonfiction editors, and me doing design. So there's this small group with this big idea of putting together an entire journal. And we're just now kind of ironing out all the kinks of what that process looks like in terms of soliciting work from writers and artists and getting this printed. We've been very lucky to have the journal spread from just some local tabling events to being at New Pioneer and Barnes & Noble. We're going to be at AWP next week, and the work is not what I expected. You can see by the title, Eminem drop-kicked me in this dream I had. I think of a literary journal, and I, again, have a specific notion of what that looks like. And, being on the brink of something as the theme applies to the work itself, it's often on the brink of fiction or on the brink of poetry, and kind of pushing the boundaries of what that means. So it's a lot of fun. I wish I had some examples here, but you can peruse the journals themselves over there. There are some really interesting pieces that have required a lot of planning and thought in terms of how we wanted to present them. And that's always a fun challenge, that it's not just putting a poem on a page. It's a poem that's in a specific shape, or it's, two poems that need to be facing each other in a specific way for a specific reason. So yeah, this is a really, really fun project to work on my end at least. And I'm excited to see where each issue goes. Selfishly, I just want to see all of those colorful spines lined up when we're on issue 10 and just have a big stack of them. Yeah.
One of the earliest slides that you had shown around your recommendations that was inspiration to you.
Sure.
And you recommended. Could you go back to that and tell us again? It was the middle section with kind of the fantastical plants
Yeah.
and things, and I didn't quite catch
The Codex Seraphinianus.
Okay.
Yeah. This is...
remember that?
Yes. I'll find a way to share that in writing. That it's absolutely incredible. And if you just search Codex Seraphinianus PDF,
Okay.
they're available to look through. I don't think it requires any questionable internet activities to acquire. Actual copies of the book are quite expensive. On my wish list. He knows. But just a really incredible work of art that and actually, I don't know if you can tell from here, the text is completely alien. And it's often compared to the Voynich manuscript, but there have been so many attempts to decode it, and nobody has succeeded at this point. They're pretty sure it can't be, given the amount of text, there are entire pages that are just text in this book. So I would be blown away if there were an actual encoding system used. But even so, you can't read anything, but he has diagrams and lists, and it gives you such a sense of there's an actual world being documented here, and you just don't know exactly what is being said, and that's
Fascinating.
yeah, and then paired with the illustrations, it's what I didn't include some of the even more bizarre ones. It gets really weird, where you really wish you could read what was being written there, and that's a fun experience.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Great job, Stacia.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here.